Is the age of the movie star over? So in the past, there were these movie stars that actually had this image attached to them. That whenever a company booked them for a given movie, whenever a director actually cast them for a certain movie, they just almost surely would give this certain movie an upside in terms of popularity. And therefore also the reason this name of the star often happened to be on the poster and the portrait of the star in the movie on the movie poster. But so there have been these big stars, these big movie stars in the past. Marilyn Monroe comes to mind. James Dean comes to mind. Maybe also Robert Redford. And you could also say Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt. So there are still living stars, kind of. But these stars, I would argue, become fewer and fewer. So why would this be the case? This is the question, this is the central question we want to try to answer. And now, in order to answer this question, I think we first have to try to understand what actually is so much appealing about the star. At first, I think one of the given appeals about a star is their potential attractiveness. The more attractive a person is, the more the given person benefits from something called the halo effect. What is the halo effect? It's basically stating, or it's basically a theory, psychological bias that states the following. If you have a given person, and this person has, so these are all the different traits of this person, 5 different traits. But you have one trait that is, in terms of the average, much more above average. So let's say a person is above average in attractiveness. What this means for this given person is now that whenever somebody views this person, a given observer views this person, and this one trait of this person is much bigger than the average, or much higher than the average, then this is the thing that stands out. So basically, the halo effect, or at least the theory about the halo effect, argues that if now a given observer observes this person, that because this one trait is above average, so basically positively above average, so this of course has to be a trait that benefits from being above average, but we already defined kind of above average as something that is a positive quality, then this one trait skews our perception of the whole person towards a positive bias in perceiving all of the other traits. So this means if a person is considered very attractive conventionally, or just in general very attractive, then, and I don't want to go into what defines attractiveness now, but what this means is that if then the intelligence of a person is below or above average, it doesn't really matter that much anymore, because we also assume that this given level of average intelligence, if this person is averagely intelligent, is also, the perception of this is also skewed. So this means we also perceive this person to be smarter, maybe to also be more emotionally intelligent, to also maybe be a potential better father, to also potentially be healthier or more active or sportier. And so now the main idea is that the movie business is kind of based, at least partially, on this halo effect. So this means now, because the movie business is also based on this, of course there is no direct correlation between those two things, but there is no direct causation between those two things, but there might be a correlation because the variable that is kind of the same is the halo effect from attractiveness. Movie stars just tend to be more attractive. And because the average person is just averagely attractive, we admire persons or people who are a little bit above attractive. Of course, there is the rational part of our mind that says, oh yeah, I would like to look like this person because then maybe I would have more potential benefits from the halo effect, because this probably would simplify my life a little bit. So there have been studies where in a given job interview, for example, the person that is more attractive, but if you have two persons, and these two persons have basically the same skill level, but now one person is more attractive, then often the person that is more attractive is chosen. And the same is true for partners, for example, for choosing your mating partner, not your mating partner, but your partner. So there is this problem. It's not really a problem, but it's just for these people, for the subset of people that are very attractive, and then maybe a subset of these very attractive people are actually movie stars. Of course, the inverse is also partially true. If you have a given person, this person might also be average attractive or below average attractive, and they might also make it as a movie star. But the more attractive you are, the more potentially likely it is, or the more likely, it's kind of a doubling, potentially likely, that you are or that you become a movie star, because that's the thing that gives you an advantage in compared to a person that has the same skill level but just the normal attractiveness. Of course, sometimes people are very good actors, and then the very good acting capability can also act as the halo. Sometimes people are very smart, and then the thing that is intelligence can act as the halo, and therefore kind of influence the perception of all the other traits of a given person. So now, if movie stars are potentially more attractive, this makes them kind of admire us. This also, because it is such a big secret for many people, because most people are average attractive, because that's what the average defines, is that most people are the average. Often, actually, we have this kind of Gaussian distribution. That means most people are in the middle, in between a certain range, and then we have a few at the tail end. We have a few in basically the low end, and we have a few in the upper end of a given distribution. So now, this is one thing. One component, you could also say. And I think because this one component is there, and because also movies in general tend to glamorize the actors in there, at least if it's a good actor, but also if it's a bad actor, this actor in real life also might, not if it's a bad actor, but if the actor in the movie acting as a different person actually displays bad behavior, is basically the enemy, or also potentially evil even. But we still see these people. And so if you now take the halo effect, this is one effect, but we also have the mere exposure effect. What is the exposure effect? It means that whenever we are exposed to something, over the course of time, we tend to like it more. At least, even if we don't like it more, at least our aversion towards something tends to diminish over time. So if this is basically a timeline, if this is not a timeline, but a spectrum of two values, and this is adversity, and this is liking something, and you are neutral in the middle, and you begin being exposed to something, like an advert, for example, or a bad actor, and then over time you see these people more and more, or you see this advert more and more, or the thing that stands there whenever you enter the supermarket is just there, it becomes more and more familiar. And as it becomes more and more familiar, the adversity or the hate towards it diminishes. So that's kind of the theory of the exposure effect. So now we have the above average attractiveness, but what we also have is the exposure effect. Because we see these actors again, even in different movies. And if you take actors if you take actors whose roles are very similar from movie to movie, and whose roles also tend to be very positively, so basically a cool guy that also tends to be very attractive, that also tends to be very charming, take Tom Cruise in many given movies, take Brad Pitt in many given movies, then what you end up with is a combination of the halo effect and the exposure effect. So we basically like these people more. And of course we could discuss many more variables that potentially lead to this movie star effect in total. But if we want to only focus on these two, and I think we, for now, only want to focus on these two, is that we then create kind of the image of the movie star. Maybe we need to add one more variable, and this one more variable is the unknown. If you get to know a person, and this person tells you all and everything within basically first meeting this person. Oh yeah, and I did this in high school, and I had these grades in high school, and basically I know these people, here is my contact list, and basically I do these hobbies, and I read these books, and that's basically my life. Then the potential problem is that over time, if the person doesn't add anything new to their life, you already know everything that is there to know. And because interest is kind of a function that is based on novelty to some extent, if a person then doesn't add something that is novel to their life, then the interest for this person might be diminished over time. Compare this to a person that only gives certain snippets of the information to another person. Basically the normal getting to know a person scenario. And now if you only give out snippets, then the rest is something the other one has to imagine. And if we have to imagine, we might imagine good things. We also might imagine bad things. But now imagine a person that has a very good attractiveness halo, but a person also has basically this exposure effect over all of these movies. Then the idea is that we also, when trying to fill in the empty spaces or fill in the dots of this person's life, that we might tend to overestimate basically all these other traits of this given person. Again, the halo effect. What this now means is that because movies depend, not because movies depend on stars, but because the stars in the movies, called movie stars, have the exposure, have the halo effect, and also have kind of the unknown. Because most people actually don't want to expose all the private lives in newspapers or online. And this leads to a mystery effect. This mystery effect is basically what makes social interaction also interesting, because there is always the potential for something new to discover about a given person. And if there is not the potential for potential new discovery of something that is novel from a given person, then the interest for this person might diminish over time. This might also partially be why partners who are relying on each other in each and every second of their life and are basically together every second of their life, over time might also have the potential downsides or experience the potential downsides of being together all the time, because you can observe the things that are, at least in theory, novel to the partner's life in real time, and therefore it's not as novel anymore compared to somebody telling you in retrospective about this new thing, and then potentially also storyizing, or you could say making the thing into a story. So now if we go back to the movie stars, we have these three different components again: the halo, exposure, and also the mystery component. And what I now would like to argue is that, of course, the attractive halo still exists, but the more the information age basically allows people to publish themselves, to publish content online, the more people that are potentially benefiting because of the halo effect might use this, because there is a higher incentive. Because if a given person is basically average attractive and they post something to social media, this might get a certain amount of attention. But now if a person additionally has the halo effect of attractiveness, then they might just have a bigger engagement. And this incentivizes the subset of people of the overall human population that is slightly above average attractiveness or is above average attractive. It incentivizes them to produce content because the incentives are just a little bit higher for these people. And the same, of course, is true for potentially more attractive actors compared to actors on the same skill level, or the same actor with the same skill level who might be less attractive. But now, as we go into this information age, and there is this incentive for attractive people to actually create content, the public basically is exposed to more and more beautiful people. Therefore, the scarcity mindset of beauty is basically diminished over time. The more you see something, the more average it becomes, even though, of course, the image, not the psychological image, but the image is skewed, because you obviously online see content that is to a higher proportion produced by people who are more attractive, because the system incentivizes these people, because we as humans are more interested in these people. Therefore, the system only loosely tracks our interests by giving the people what the people actually want. So therefore, over time, the perception of beauty probably changes, and we tend to seek maybe more and more outliers. But that's not the thing I wanted to take away from this argument. The thing I wanted to take away from this argument is that if we have more and more potentially famous people online that are above average attractiveness to a much higher likelihood compared to what? Compared to a given normal person, then this means the halo effect of the movie star doesn't work as well anymore. Because the movie star would have to be even higher in attractiveness in order for the halo effect to outshine the effect of the attractiveness, the halo effect of influencers. But if they are on the same level, then the movie star just might not benefit from the halo effect that much anymore. Because the perception of beauty in total, the perception of scarcity of beauty of a given population, the human population, is basically diminished. This means the halo effect is now not working as well anymore. The exposure effect is also more and more diminishing. If you think about it, if you have a given movie, so let's say a normal actor but stars in a movie, and this movie is 90 minutes, 120 minutes, and people see on average a movie maybe once. So if an actor now, over the lifetime, let's say over their acting period, produces, let's say 40 movies, that's already quite much. Every 2 years, not 40 movies, but movies for 40 years. And if an actor then has a movie coming out every 2 years, this gives us 20 movies in total. 20 movies multiplied by 2 hours is only 40 hours total of the actor. That is basically then the potential exposure, length of exposure for an average person that sees. Of course, we have people that don't watch movies at all. We have people that watch different kinds of movies. Therefore, I just say every 2 years, and the average person watches the whole movie, which is 2 hours. Then that's only 20 hours. It's not 20, it's 40. It's 20 movies multiplied by 2 hours of total material that we can consume of this person. Compare this to a random given influencer that has reached a certain threshold of being famous. From this influencer, potentially, let's just take any one, maybe David Dobrik. Of course, you don't really see David Dobrik in these videos, and therefore he's a bad example. But if you take another one, let's say Logan Paul, and you take him and you add up all the hours and hours of content that is available online, where you can see Logan Paul basically online, then what this results in is basically just more compared to an actor. And now, because also people's consumption habits change, and because of social media, and because also these people are much more in our lives, because they potentially can post daily, even multiple times a day. And an actor only posts every 2 years. And an actor cannot even influence, basically doesn't have creative control, usually, about the overall image a movie gives about this actor. I mean, big movie stars, as you know them, might have creative control. Brad Pitt, for example, has his own production company. Will Smith, whenever he stars in a movie, might have a say in what his character actually is in this movie. But what I would argue is that there is now this alternative. It's following people in real life compared to following people in fictional stories that change over time all the time. This might also be why partially the Marvel Cinematic Universe might be so successful. At least that might explain basically one thing about it. Because we tend to like things that are similar but have some novelty. Let's take the average relationship. You and a friend of yours. You want to know about this friend, and you already know so much about this friend. But you could also potentially get to know new persons every single time. But most of us don't. So therefore, there might be a potential reasoning behind this, why we come back to the same person. And this is more or less, obviously, that the person already knows something about us, that we already know something about the person. And now, if you compare this to movies and to series, we already know something about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't really know something about us, apart us being or potentially being a fan of this universe. But what this means now is that we might tend to like things more that are similar, but only have a certain thing, a certain amount of novelty added on top of this similar thing. So we don't want the whole thing to be 100% novel, but we want to have something that has a stability to it, but then adds a certain novelty. That might also explain why movies, or why Hollywood studios more and more bank on movies that are actually sequels. But if we now compare this thinking to the movie star and to an influencer, then because the influencer offers so much more stability over time, because they are basically themselves usually, and over time, of course, they make new things, but this is the part that is the novelty. But the actors might also have this novelty part, but to a bigger extent, therefore not as much relying on the stability part. So first we discussed the halo effect and the potential downgrade of the halo effect of movie stars. Then we discussed the exposure effect, which now also has a better alternative in influencers, because you can follow these people, because these people tend to share more information. And now the mystery effect. Because there is a better alternative for movie stars, and because also if a given movie star enters social media and basically crosses over to the other sphere. Take Angelina Jolie, for example. For years she didn't have a social media account, but now she has, in order to use the potential audience she has for things she wants to promote, like her book, for example, or like potential human rights issues. And now, if a movie star enters onto the other sphere, they of course benefit from both worlds. But what this also means is, if there is an incentive for a given movie star to now also become a social media influencer, that a random given movie star that doesn't do social media is basically off worse, not less. And what this now also leads towards is, if a given movie star crosses over to the social media sphere and they share more and more information about their thinking, about their lives, they share more and more opinions about what they think, is that the mystery of movie stars that lets us basically extrapolate from the things we already know about a movie star, and lets us extrapolate all the other things a movie star potentially does, like who is he dating? That's one of the most essential questions we as a human society have to ask ourselves. Then this means that there is an incentive for a given movie star to also basically not use the mystery effect anymore by crossing over to the social media sphere. And that's in total why I think these three variables, again, halo, exposure, and mystery, are resulting currently in a situation where it makes sense for a given movie star to give up on the mystery, and in addition, the halo effect and the exposure effect just don't work as well anymore. I mean, in absolute terms, they still work, but in relative terms, there is now a better alternative for people who seek out other people, which is social media influencers.